Hello, everyone. Welcome to our listeners, and thank you for listening again. This is another episode of The Edge. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Today, I'm very happy to say we've got Francois Guay here to talk to us. So again, I'm going to kick off as I do every other podcast. I'm not really going to change my first question. The first question is going to be, give us a little bit a background about yourself, kind of where you started out, how you got into the industry, and then we'll go from there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I grew up in Ontario, and I went into public administration thinking I was going to change the world by working in government. When I graduated and went to government, I realized this was not the place for me. I was an entrepreneur. Left after about 7 years, I guess. Took me some time to figure it out in my young years, and went to a company called Nortel Networks. So during the telecom boom, and started there as a recruiter, and within a couple of years, I was a director and then a VP of global recruiting, and just fell in love with telecom and lived through the boom and the bust. It was tremendous times, tremendous technologies, mergers and acquisitions, and fell in love with that whole energy level. So started my own company after that. Started a social media company in 2003, so fell in love with the whole networking and building networks. And then, ended up doing a contract about 5 years ago at Fortinet as their head of HR, and working with the co-founder of the company, Michael Z. And I fell in love with cybersecurity, just like I had with telecom, and just saw the huge growth potential and just hooked on 100% into cyber. And built the companies that I built now to take advantage of that boom and bust and take advantage of that energy level.
Yeah, and I know one of the things you talk about in a post on LinkedIn is the Canadian Cybersecurity Network. I see that you founded that. I'd be interested, like, kind of what was it? It feels, we talk to a lot of people on our podcast that want to give back and want to help people, and I get the impression from seeing your posts, that's kind of what you're trying to do, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So kind of why did you start down that road of founding that?
Well, when I started looking at the overall cybersecurity space in Canada, I realized there was no national organization focused on membership. And I decided that was something that I would love to build. I have this passion for building networks and people networks. So I started building it on LinkedIn just as a start, and started with 0 people and really focused on cybersecurity people. So people that were either pen testers or CISOs or, worked in the industry as owners of companies or SOC analysts, and really tried to focus 100% on the community and just focus there. And then started working with, adding students to it, people that had an interest in it. And it just grew. It just became the largest cybersecurity network in Canada. And last year, we decided to build a community out of it on a community-based portal. So we approached sponsors, got a portal, so that we could offer services. So we could start offering mentoring services. So we could offer career services. So we could offer events on our digital platform. And all those great things to build community, but also to help companies grow in Canada. So our primary focus is on growing talent, but also on growing businesses in Canada.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of is important to me is relationships, and it always has been throughout my career. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, that working in kind of infrastructure, which is where I came from. I mean, I started off in an infrastructure role when cyber wasn't a thing. Security became a thing, and then cyber became a thing. We've talked people like Kevin, and we've talked about with other people that say when they tried to break into the industry, there wasn't a lot of help available. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily found that when I tried to break into the industry, because funnily enough, I didn't really break in. We grew into the industry. That's why I've got grey hair. So these things were relatively kind of evolved around us. So you didn't need to really break in, and nobody could really help us back then because nobody had any of the answers. So I think that's being right kind of at the beginning of the internet, and those kind of things enabled us to all learn together. But I've certainly heard people say that breaking into infrastructure 10 years after that was hard. People were maybe protecting their roles. Maybe there wasn't enough roles. Maybe there was kind of this mentality of, I don't want to help someone else in case they take my job or become better than me or something. I don't know. But the way I see cyber is, and we'll get on to the skills gap and all of that in a minute, but the way I see cyber is there are far more jobs available than we have talent, or that's at least how I feel. And that makes me understand a bit more maybe why everyone's willing to help. I think for me, this is a massive war against very strong opposition. The opposition have many tactics. They have a lot of funding. They exploit a lot of weaknesses that have been there for a long time. And if we don't team up and fight these battles together, I think we're in problems. And we spoke to Chase Cunningham recently about, and he gave us an analogy about a gazelle getting attacked in the wild. But and it used to be the case that you could protect your own business or your own set of sites or whatever it might be. You could put your firewall around you and protect you, and in the hope that someone would come along, try and get in and go, well, they're too strong, and go to the next business or the next house or whatever it is you're protecting. I think the problem we have today is there are tunnels between all the houses. There's that supply chain. No one company is solely independent. So you make your company really, really strong, but unless every single part of that chain is protected with the same level of strength, they will target the weakest link, and that weakest link, unfortunately, will get you in to the business. So we do need to fight this battle together. But I alluded to the kind of the skills gap, let's say. Now, what I liked earlier on that you said was when you said you created the cybersecurity network, you talked about SOC analysts and pen testers and all of those things. When I speak to a lot of my friends about that I work in cyber, they all see it as one job. We all do the same thing. And I don't think that's true. I mean, infrastructure was very similar. You couldn't take normally a network person and go and throw them into a database world. Very different roles, right? There was some overlap in certain things. And I think as things evolved over time, you needed to know a little bit about each thing. But cybersecurity, for me, you have your SOC analysts, you have your pen testers, different skill sets. You've got the CISOs that need to have a bit more business knowledge, maybe. So do you see there being a skills gap? And is it just in certain areas, or is it in all of those areas? And I know that's a difficult question, but we have a bit of time.
It is a very difficult question. And the reason why is there's a lot of opposing forces taking place here. Is there a skills gap? There is, of course. The problem is there not enough talent, or will there not be enough talent? I'm not sure that's the case. I think, unfortunately, some of the biggest issues that take place is the complexity of job descriptions. So if you start looking at the complexity of job descriptions today that are being asked for by companies, I mean, if I'm a hiring manager, of course I'm going to ask for as much as I can get and want the recruiters to go out and source it and recruit it. But what has to happen is that the recruiters have to push back based on the reality of the marketplace. And the reality is that if you're asking for a minimum of 3 to 5 years of business experience, you know, the majority of new grads that are coming in don't have that level of experience. They may have 3 to 6 months of basic experience. If they're lucky, maybe they have a year. Maybe they worked on a practicum. Maybe they worked on something. But the reality is asking for those years of experience eliminates them completely. Now, there are some companies that will be open to taking on people that have less experience based on their skill set. But I think the biggest problem today, like it was during the telecom boom, okay, so it's no different. I used to be asked all the time to find PhDs in telecom or in networking. And you know, there's only so many of those individuals around. And luckily, I worked at Nortel, and we hired 33% of all graduating PhDs and engineers in the country, okay? But the reality was there was never enough. There was never going to be enough to satisfy the business. So we started pushing back and saying, you got to start looking at BAs. You got to start looking at different skill sets to meet that gap. And then you had competition start coming in that were much more nimble. Companies like Cisco, and you started having companies like, a whole bunch of startups that started eating our lunch. And what happens is that the culture has to change. So it requires a huge culture shift in regards to how you look for skills. And you have to start looking at the basic skill sets. You know, what makes somebody good as a SOC analyst? Is it curiosity? Is it communication skills? Is it the ability to learn quickly new software, new things? And I think that is the root cause. A lot of recruiters, unfortunately, rely on not understanding the business, but understanding recruitment. You have to understand the products that are in the company. You have to understand the systems that are in the company. You have to understand the company's clients and customers. You have to understand the business environment to be able to recruit people properly. And that is a huge gap. And I'm not saying that all recruiters don't have that knowledge, but the recruiters that have that knowledge have a huge leg up on the competition. And I would say that maybe 10 to 15% of recruiters in cybersecurity have that knowledge. The rest are new to the industry potentially and have to learn from the business. And that's a huge investment, but they need that investment. So I'll stop there and just see what else you want to ask before I kind of go a little deeper.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is you hit it on the head there when you were talking about Nortel and some of the challenges they had, that they wanted to hire a PhD for every role. And, there's a lot of companies out there that, they want the best talent, and rightfully so. The best talent isn't available. They're either happy in their own roles or they don't exist. What have you seen in terms of how companies incorporate people who are new to cybersecurity? Because it does take leadership to make that happen. You have to develop a culture of mentoring within the team, the organization, that you can essentially accept a pipeline of people who may have just graduated from college or making a job change or have recently left the military, that don't have that corporate experience, and bring them into the organization, help them adjust, help them learn. What have you seen in that respect? Has that been a successful method in organizations?
I think it can be a highly successful method. Unfortunately, for most of the companies that I have seen, it's a huge failure, simply because most of the companies want to hire experienced hires. They don't want to waste time on, bringing someone up to speed for 8 months to a year. And I've seen this as an example. I'll take the example of co-ops, hiring, co-ops or intern into your organization. A lot of companies will say no to that, simply because they don't want to create the investment and then those people leave. They don't think it's worth it. They think you're going to be basically, I'll use the word babysitting for 6 to 8 months before they can get any value out of the students. So they don't want to make that investment. Now, having said that, there are companies that are willing to make that investment. Usually they're smaller, they're SMBs, they need the skill set, and they'll actually recruit more intensely from co-ops to get the right people into the company. But I haven't seen a lot of companies personally that have invested really well in that whole train up period. There are some that are doing a good job of doing that, aligning mentors to individuals, to align coworkers to someone so they can spend more time. But a lot of it, what I've seen, unfortunately, is a lot of lip service versus actually a lot of investment. And I'm being a little forceful, but I think it's a huge requirement now to invest in new talent coming into the industry, and most companies are not willing to do it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of unfortunate. If there is a gap, which we've said there is a gap, and you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, that's the definition of insanity, and that's what companies seem to be doing, is they just keep trying to find that unicorn talent out there. They're not finding it, therefore there's a gap, or therefore those positions are not getting filled. They don't have eyes on the telemetry, and guess what? They get hacked, or they hire somebody who they think has those skills and doesn't. I think there's a need for a great rethink there, and you've got to create the pipeline, and you can't be afraid that somebody's going to leave in 2 years, because even the high-end talent, if they find a better opportunity, they're gone. There was a study, an HR study, basically that said in order for an employee to be effective, they have to be in their role for almost 6 months in order to get a return on investment. I think the number is right around 4 years. So, that's a challenge out there for companies. You got to find the talent. In a sense, my opinion is you got to make the talent.
Yeah, and I think a couple of points there, John. One of the things I've noticed is I do a lot of recruiting in the U.S. Through my company, and I do a lot in Texas as an example. And I would say the normal turnover there on the cybersecurity side is probably you're pretty lucky if it's 2 years. For most of the people that are in that organization, they're shifting jobs every 2 years, and as an employer, you need to understand that's likely going to be the case and plan for it. And you need to invest so that you hope they come back. They may come back in 4 years or 6 years to pursue another part of their career where you've been a big part of that, and they remember that. If you're a bad employer, they're not coming back to you. They're going to avoid you. What we've done in Canada to try and get individuals experience coming in is a cyber student portal. And let me explain that for a second, because it may be different in other countries, but in Canada, we have co-op internships, of course, and every school has a different program and different rules to bring people into those programs. So that means as an employer, you have to deal with each university and each college separately. Not any employer, unless they're like, Amazon or Fortinet, is going to be able to handle all these schools. You go to one school, you get the talent you get from that school, and you may hire them or you may not. So the program in this case allows all employers, to actually go to a portal and access all Canadian cyber students in one place. So if you think about that, we're removing the barriers for the students, we're removing the barriers for the employers. The schools are still going to get their paperwork, okay, because they have to be completed afterwards. But we're opening the doors for more employers to view more talent across the country and access them for full-time student employment, co-ops, internships, part-time or contract work. And the reason we're doing this is we want students to get experience, and they should be able to go based on their own schedule. What we're hearing from employers is that it's so difficult to work with different schools, different processes, and they lose a lot of time, and they have to invest an awful lot to get those relationships. And I'm not saying investing in schools is a bad thing. You should develop with your local schools programs and share some of your products and everything else. But what I'm saying is that make the hiring process much easier. So that's what we've done with the Cyber Student Portal, and we're going to do a lot more of that for the cyber community as we grow, because it's a major problem in a lot of other areas as well of recruitment.
So I have a question that maybe relates to the previous topic, maybe a little bit to this one. And we talk quite a lot about cyber burnout. We talk about mental health for cyber people. We talk about people leave all the time and are jumping jobs. And we talked a little bit about training just now and support. Now, being a SOC analyst can be a stressful job. Being a CISO, I'm sure, is a stressful job. Do you see anybody offering any form of emotional support or that form of training, being able to help people deal with stressful environments? Now, you get that in the Army, you get that in the Navy, you get that in the military services. You get to understand how to deal with really difficult situations. I had some of it over the years for senior roles that I was in, dealing with mergers and acquisitions, or if stuff went wrong. I just wonder, because we talk a lot about students, we talk about students entering the workforce. Now, most of us had time to learn our career, to learn our skill, to not be thrown straight into the deep end. We got taught how to swim a little bit beforehand. I'm noticing now that a lot of people go into being a SOC analyst or a threat responder or something that is potentially very hard mentally. And it's okay training someone on a computer, but is anyone training them how to deal with those really difficult things, like training them maybe, or helping them eat properly, sleep properly, exercise properly, all of those basic things that I certainly never got taught. I don't believe John got taught. We've had to learn by
Yeah,
doing.
let me add a little color there. I mean, when we came up in the industry, there weren't things like smartphones. There was a rotary phone or a digital phone that you had to dial in. Those calls didn't come. The company may not have been 24/7. Digital transformation was not a thing. So, life was a little more regimented. When you were off,
Yep.
essentially. Maybe you carried a beeper, but you handed that beeper off so you could get a good night of sleep if you weren't on call. Now things have changed. I mean, it's 24/7. It's on. Everyone's got a smartphone. You don't put the smartphone down. I remember when we started to bring phones into the office, and the company was debating whether or not to pay for it. And I was like, "Yeah, dude, you're going to get your return on investment in like 2 weeks. Yeah, you just write the check, give them the phone." I think that's the challenge is the workforce coming up doesn't know how to disconnect. They don't know that there's a time when you're on the clock and there's a time when you're not on the clock, and they're just consumed with, hey, this is a new job, this is exciting, I'm just going to go all in, and then bam, 2 years down the road, they're feeling the pain.
Well, John, you make a good point, and I'll try and combine both Jay's point and John's point here, but there is an awful lot of burnout taking place. And there are some companies that are investing some resources into workers, career coaches, educational coaches, people to come in and help individuals kind of go over that bump. But coming back to John's point, I think, look, I'm as bad as everybody else. I get onto my phone at night and I'm going, why did I pick up this phone? Put it aside, live your life, right? Stop working. We have this constant nudge now and I would say mostly social media. I'll say social media, which preoccupies us. It's become part of our kind of, comfort blanket where we need to look at it, even though we're not going to get any value out of it. So I think it's partly the mindset. And it's not only young people coming in that have this issue now, it's people like me and Jaye and John that get preoccupied. So, what I used to do when I was working, and I usually do when I'm working, is I shut off at some point at 5 or 6 o'clock at night. I shut off. There may still be emergencies and I'll respond to them. But the reality is I shut off from work, but I'm still on social media. And part of the challenge now is to just shut off that phone and just get away from social for a while. That takes over another part of our life that makes us a little bit more anxious, and all those kinds of things. So I think it's maybe not just a cyber issue. It's one that exacerbates cyber trends in industry. But I think personally we have to take control of our own lives. I think businesses are always going to demand more. I mean, I remember working at Nortel and working 16-hour, 18-hour days, traveling all over the world, being in Chicago and having to go to London, England. And anyway, it was, and at some point you just have to say enough's enough, and say, look, I'm going to take time for myself, or I'm going to change roles and careers. I need to get balance, and we need to take control of our own lives.
Yeah, I wonder if companies are going to at any point realize that running your staff constantly until they get to like 50% of their ability is beneficial to anybody. I mean, I certainly know that the UK and the European approach to, say, vacations, we call them holidays, you guys call them vacations, is very different. I mean, we get forced to take 20, 25 days off a year, and I would be bonus based on ensuring my staff took time off and ensuring that I took time off. And it was hard. I mean, I spent most of my career taking my laptop and my phone on holiday. So I did, holiday was just for me. And I used to joke about it's just working from somewhere hot. But I certainly know in the US that there seems to be this kind of mentality that if you take holiday, you're not a good employee. And the way I see it is, I know when I'm at 100%. What? In fact, I probably haven't been at 100% since I was 20. But I know where I'm at when I'm at like 95%. Mm-hmm. And once I start to get to say 85 or 80%, I'm like, I need a break. And that could be that in a day. I mean, I may have worn myself out by sitting here for 6 or 7 hours and I need to get up and go for a walk, get a drink, whatever. Or it may well be that I've tried to recharge my batteries by having a weekend off and doing a bit of walking or whatever it might be, and I've not got recharged. And then I start to realize that, okay, I need a week off. I need to go and lie on a beach or do whatever you like vacationing. And I certainly see that a lot of countries don't really allow for that. They'll work you. And the only time you really get a holiday is when you're worn out, you quit, and you have 2 weeks before you start your next job. And I don't want to call out any particular country, because I think, as you've alluded to, we are responsible for that as well. It's not just a business. The business is going to want to get as much as they possibly can because they're competing against other businesses. But it's not, I just don't think in the world we live in, it's not the right approach now. I think both myself and John have learned through the painful realization of we've made a mistake and we've got burnt out. We've maybe learned to spot those signs a little bit more than we would have 20 years ago. But I think we have a responsibility as people and as businesses to protect that new workforce. If you wear them out when they're 20, and it's harder to wear a 20-year-old out, to be fair, but if you wear them out when they're 20 or 25, they'll not come and work for you again, and they might not actually have the ability to go and work anywhere. And we're going to end up with a workforce that, when you try and apply the pressure, they collapse. And we've kind of digressed a bit, but I think that's pretty important for society.
Absolutely.
So another question, we'll get back on topic. You posted recently a LinkedIn poll, and you asked people what they felt was the reason why they weren't getting jobs. And the top one was experience. And we've talked a little bit about it before. I see it all the time. I see a lot of companies asking for experience, and I think there has to be a balance of what they're asking for. But if you are new and you're trying to get into the industry and a company's requesting experience, in your experience, what can people do to gain that? I mean, I used to have a home lab in my garage. I would have when VMware came out, I had a VMware environment. I had routers, switches, I had a network, I had VPN tools. I was able to kind of do all that, but there was a cost involved in that. And I was lucky enough to work for a company that let me borrow old stuff. And I know you can get it off of eBay and stuff, but I tinkered, I played, I broke stuff, I rebuilt it, I broke it again, I rebuilt it. What do you think people should do? Because cyber's a little bit different. We're not building servers or networks, we're protecting them. So what do you think people can do to kind of gain that experience?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and I usually highly recommend people that are going into a study program to jump onto a co-op or an internship or something like that to actually build that experience, because it's really important that employers see that you're making an effort. And I think Jay, you make the point of actually going in when you were younger, of building these things in your, a lab in your house and trying things and doing things. And I think employers want to see that. The project we did on the Cyber Student Portal, we actually went to employers and said, what are you looking for? And they said, we want to see how people make an effort. We want to see what they're going to do. We want to see that they're actually trying things. So it could just be it could be a practicum. It could be a project you're working on at university or college, or it could just be something you're doing in your basement or in your room at night. They want you to showcase something. They want to showcase that you're thinking about cybersecurity or solving problems. And I think that's a huge thing. Or going on events like Try Hack Me or Hack the Box and those kinds of things. If you're in those areas, but I think that's absolutely critical. The other thing they're looking for is they want to see personality. They want to see the personality of individuals. They want to see you have communication skills. So, here we are at the portal, and one of the things we highly, highly recommend on the portal is load up a video. People want to see you. Employers actually want to see you. And I know it's kind of counter to certain certain ways that recruiters are doing now. They don't want to show gender. They don't want to show, cultural background and so on. But employers that want to hire want to know what kind of personality you have. They want to see if you can talk. They want to see if you understand cyber. So loading up a 1-minute video gives them a glance at who you are, and sharing volunteering experiences. So have you volunteered with organizations to show your cyber skills? Do you have projects on GitHub that you can showcase? So I think the key is that you build up that experience one way or another. And you shouldn't be waiting on the employers. Yes, you have to find positive employers. There are going to be a lot of negative employers out there. They're going to say no, but look for the ones that say yes, or say, approach them while you're in university and college to actually reach out and say, I'd like to kind of see your lab. Can I come in? Can I actually come in and do some shadowing or anything? And I think the ones that are persistent and show likability and actually that their interest are actually going to have a step up on everybody else. And there are students that are doing this. I have a co-op working for me right now that's just blowing the doors out of doing a project for me. So it's that kind of outgoing behavior that's going to entice employers. So I tell everybody that, yes, network, approach as many employers as you can, look for the ones that are the mentors, and develop stuff that you can actually showcase on your skill set. And absolutely work on your skills around communication, because I'll guarantee you one of the most important things in cybersecurity these days is the ability to communicate. Communicate to your peers, communicate to your clients. And if you can't do that, you're at a huge disadvantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed a bunch of things on the head there. Personality, communications. The other piece is business knowledge, because cybersecurity is not only about IT. It's now becoming more of a business function. So you have to understand, how business makes money, right? Where does the dollar start? Or UK was the euro. What is it now, Jay? The pound?
We've never been the euro. We've only ever been the pound. We've
All
never
right,
changed.
Showing my ignorance there. But you got to understand how a company makes their money, and then if you're in cyber, you got to understand how you protect that coinage as it moves throughout the company. Business skills are a key one. And then somebody who used to hire teams, there was always a technical discussion, but at the end of the day, if you showed and I think you wrote a post about this on your LinkedIn page. If you showed the ability to do the technical side, that was great. But at the end of the day, you were looking for that cultural fit and that team fit, and that at the end of the day was the difference. Is if I can train you on technology, you show an interest, you show a curiosity, you show a willingness to learn. I'm now really interested in the cultural fit, because if you bring somebody in who's going to break the culture, we don't want that person. That was a major piece. So the user interface, as we call it in IT, is critical in looking to get that job.
I think one of the things that I've always said to people that I've been trying to help over the years is put yourself out there and be seen. And I remember not that long ago, somebody saying to me, but that's a risk. What if people don't like me? Now, I get that. I mean, there are lots of people active on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I post my thoughts. I post posts. I write articles. I post videos. Me and John do the podcast. We're on YouTube. We do all these things. And this particular person said to me, that's a huge risk. You're literally, people can see everything about you. And I'm like, but that's perfect. Yeah. You'll have a group of people that like that and like me, and maybe companies like that and want to hire me in the future. And I'll equally have a group of people that don't like it and don't want to hire me. Right. It's a lot easier to know that someone's not going to hire you before you've done 4 or 5 interviews. Now, I'm pretty confident that there's bound to be somebody out there that likes me. I think in a way, John quite likes me. So Yeah. So I'm quite an open and honest guy, and I'm trying to do my best. It might not always be perfect, but I'm willing to put it out there. Now, like I said, that is scary because IT folks and cyber folks aren't always people like friendly. They're I'm not trying to put anyone down, but there are a lot of people that would rather not talk to people, and et cetera, et cetera. So putting yourself out there can be difficult. But it's still something I would always advise people to do. Always be nice, be polite, but be you. Because if you get interviewed and you haven't been you via the process, you've either got to fake it for 20 years or somebody soon enough's going to figure out that wasn't you.
Well, the other piece is the world's a small place. IT is a small place. Networking is a small place. Security is a small place. And it's bound to, as you move up the levels and move up the layers, you're bound to run into somebody who knows you or had an experience with you. And hopefully that was a good experience. If it was a bad experience, if you're a person who wants to burn bridges all the time, you're not going to move up. If you're somebody who builds coalitions, has a good reputation, that's going to be a help to you. So it's as much as you may be the technical wizard, the user interface has a huge impact on your career. So don't neglect it.
I was told by somebody I got a lot of respect for when I was younger that anyone you trample to get up the ladder is going to kick you and punch you when you come back down again.
Absolutely.
Now, great piece of advice. We're time's flying, so I've got a few more questions before we get to the fun questions. There's a lot of noise in the industry about zero trust. There's a lot of, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's not just a buzzword. I do think there's merit in it. For somebody that talks to people, recruits people, talks to companies, and tries to tie the two together, are you hearing about zero trust? Are people starting to go, I need somebody that understands zero trust or the principles or has experience with zero trust? Is it starting to come up?
You hear it a little bit with certain companies, but I don't think it's a huge trend. You're hearing it, the buzzwords are there, but you're not really looking to see that many people that have experience with it. I'm not seeing it as something that's defining if someone gets hired or not, at least not yet.
Yeah, because I saw an article, and I can't remember who posted it, and maybe I'll put it in the comments when we post this, but somebody wrote an article about there being a chief zero trust architect type role in companies. And John, I don't know if you can remember who it was, but I saw it come up on LinkedIn, and I'm like, okay, it took however many years for the CISO to be a role. How long will it take for there to be a chief zero trust architect or a chief
I
zero
think
trust
this
person?
is going to be an emerging topic, especially with the executive order and some of the pressures coming down from the government, at least in the U.S., to suppliers. We're going to see more and more about it, and added on that, all the high-profile hacks and ransomware and everything in the news. Companies, they need a different strategy than just putting a pile of technology on the table and then lighting it on fire because, well, they couldn't deploy it. So that's their editorial comment for the day.
It's an interesting point. I did a post yesterday. You may not have seen it, but I did a poll, I should say. And the poll was, should Canada put in place a minister in charge of cybersecurity? And there was 340 responses just yesterday. It was just, insane. Everybody's, jumped on it. And I think it was close to about 88% or 86% said yes. And this is really interesting. I was kind of curious. I think New Zealand's the only main, top country of our peers that has one in place currently. There's other countries discussing it, I believe, but I believe it's a really important decision point. One neck to hold, one place to kind of, have certain decisions. If it's, education across the country around cybersecurity, or if it's, certain legislation or certain things that are critical. I don't think they have a responsibility for everything. You got to be really careful what you make that role. But I do believe that creating the focus, a little bit like Israel does, So as an example, you know, cybersecurity in Israel from an educational perspective is key. Not only does it tie into the military, which is becoming a big issue for all of us, I think it's something fundamental in their culture about defending and protecting, and having that built into our psyche. I think is something extremely relevant. If you know, we're all very proud of our countries. We're very, you know, we need to protect our identity. We need to protect our culture and all these great things. Well, cybersecurity is now part of that. If you're not, you know, protecting your assets and you're not protecting your company, and you're not protecting your country, then you know, your infrastructure, you're going to be in trouble. And I think we're going to see mounting evidence of attacks over the next 6 months to a year with the conflicts that are taking place. We're seeing it already, and I think that, you know, we're in a defensive mode, and we need to start shifting to not only, you know, better defense, but, you know, offense.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on the topic of digital citizenry, and that's something that needs to be discussed more often. As we bring young folks into the world, or even some of the older folks, you got to understand the responsibilities of cyber, understand the responsibilities of this great technology that we all have in our hands. And you know, we've touched on it several times: when to use it, when to put it down, but you know, how it can help you and how it can hinder you, and you know, evolve to that standard. And we need to have more conversations around that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole world is now interconnected at every level, at every age, in every country. I mean, it's very easy to get around. People travel a lot. Businesses are interconnected. If we don't work together, we're going to have problems moving forward. And I personally think it's a cultural change, and it needs to start from the ground up, from younger generations. They need to understand the risks and why they should do certain things, because otherwise in 10 or 15 years or even less, things are progressing so quickly, we will be in trouble. But we are getting short on time. I want to ask you kind of 2 food-related questions, food being a passion of mine, and then we'll let John get on to something else. The first question is, a lot of people believe that pineapple should not be put on pizza, and then there are other people that are wrong and believe it should. Which camp are you in? Are you in a pineapple on pizza camp, or are you not?
No pineapple.
Man.
No pineapple. No pineapple. It's an awful travesty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
I completely agree. I read a blog recently because a friend of mine listened to a podcast it recorded, and he's a pineapple on pizza lover, and he sent me a blog that talks about it at length, and I was just like, no, you're just wrong. It just doesn't go.
You just haven't had the right one. You haven't had the right one.
Yeah. So the second food related question. You've obviously got to travel a bit in your life. You said you've been over to London and places like that. What's the best meal you've ever had? Where was it, and why was it the best meal? Was it actually the meal, or the atmosphere, or the place? What was it about it?
I would say that it's a traditional meal with family and friends, and I would have to point to either Christmas dinner or Easter dinner. I love my turkey dinner.
Yeah,
Give me turkey and all the fixings and gravy and mashed potatoes and cranberries, and I'm in heaven. So I definitely have to say that I love cooking it. I love cooking the whole meal for my family, and we devour it. And we have French Canadian traditional meat pie with it, and it is the best meal you'll ever have.
nice. I like that answer. John, one from you.
Yeah, so let's talk TV and movies. There's been a lot of great series out in the last 12 months, whether it's Netflix, HBO, Showtime, you name it. There's been some great movies as well. I haven't done as many movies as I've done in the past because I honestly like to stream them and sit in my own house. But if you kind of review what you've watched over the past 12 months, whether it be a series or a movie, any recommendations?
I think on the series side, one that will probably surprise some people that I absolutely loved was Ozarks. Really loved the Ozark series. But from a movie perspective, I'm going to go with the big standard for 2022, which was Top Gun. I really enjoyed
solid choice.
Just getting lost in this fun escapade.
Yeah, I mean,
that was amazing. It was a fun movie. It was, and the way that it was filmed, that it wasn't a green screen and some of the movie magic that they actually put them in the airplanes, forced them, with GFX and the way their faces smushed. I really, really liked what they did there.
so I'm going to tell you something that, John, you don't know either, but obviously I started off my career kind of playing games. And my name, if I played games, was either Maverick or Top Gun. So, and my login screen on the VMS system that we had was the start of Top Gun with that writing. So that's how sad I am. But yeah, such a great film. I mean, I love the original film, and I was really nervous about the new one coming out, just because it could have gone so badly wrong. But I'm glad it took so long to make, because it's got the flavor of the first one, but updated. It was great, and the filming was great. I just really enjoyed it. But also, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We really appreciate you coming on. I mean, our series of podcasts and now YouTube videos would not be the same without interesting guests. People would get very quickly bored of me and most likely John at some point. So it's great to get people on, some really good topics covered. John, anything you want to add before we wrap?
No, another great conversation. This one more focused on the talent side, the people side of cybersecurity. So really appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much, Jaye and John. Just wonderful being on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.